So the fourth thing that you want to do to prepare your speech really effectively is you want to clarify each of those points that you've created in your presentation outline by offering examples or stories or some other type of evidence, but examples and stories work really well. Most people think that you have to fill your presentation with lots of data to make the presentation have high value. And I'm not saying that's not totally true, but a great example is worth 1,000 points of data. So the example is easier for the audience to understand. It's also for you, the presenter, to remember as well. For instance, if you're giving a report about how revenue dropped suddenly at the start of the COVID pandemic, you got a couple of different options. Number one, you could try to remember all of the numbers involved, probably a bunch of them, or worse, just reading a series of numbers to your audience. A lot of times folks will just kind of create a different bullet point for each one of the numbers. But a better way to do it though is to create a data table and put that in a handout, and then just give your audience a couple of examples verbally about what that data table means. So like for instance, you could say something like, hey guys, if you recall in late February of 2020, the COVID scare caused many of our potential contracts to be delayed. Then by mid-March, over 90% of those contracts that our sales team closed but had not yet been delivered, a lot of those canceled within a couple of weeks. So that all changed though in April when, and then you kind of go into the story about what happened and give it an example of one thing that happened in April that kind of turned it around. That's where the income started to come back up, right? So if you give the details or the data in a narrative format or in a story format, the data now becomes more interesting. It's also easier for you to remember your story because you were there. You just play the video in your head of what occurred. And then it's also going to be easier for the audience to pay attention as well. By the way, and the easiest way to come up with a story for a bullet point is to ask yourself, like when you read your bullet point, if it's a really well laid out concept or really well laid out bullet point, you can just ask yourself, so what's a good example that I could use to explain this? And then come up with one or two for each one of those bullet points to prepare for your presentation much more efficiently and much more effectively.